October 14th, 1944, 0347 a.m. The Vosges Mountains, eastern France. Private First Class Johnny Rivers crouched in a foxhole so cold his breath turned to ice on his rifle barrel. Navajo, age 19, 5'7", 138 pounds. He could taste copper in his mouth, blood from a split lip. The Germans owned the ridgeline above. Mortars every 20 minutes, machine gun nests dug into granite. His platoon, what was left of it, pinned in a horseshoe of death. He had an idea. They laughed. Sergeant Kowalski looked at him like he'd gone insane. "You want to what?" "Use my voice," Johnny said. "Make them think we got a whole company up here." Kowalski spat tobacco juice into the frozen mud. "Kid, shut up and dig." Lieutenant Brennan didn't even turn around, just waved him off. "We need bullets, Rivers, not circus tricks." But Johnny had been thinking about it for 3 days, since the ambush at Col de la Schlucht, since he'd heard the Germans shouting coordinates to each other in the dark, voices bouncing off rock walls, echoing, multiplying. He waited. The problem had a body count. Private Eugene Marks, October 11th, headshot, trying to flank left through the pines. The Germans heard him coming. Eugene was from Pittsburgh, 22 years old, engaged. He kept a photograph of a girl named Dorothy folded in his helmet liner. Corporal James DeWitt, October 12th, chest wound, bled out in 40 minutes. He died calling for his mother. James was from Oregon. He'd promised to take Johnny salmon fishing after the war. He'd explained the whole process, the river, the net, the smokehouse. Private Luis Sanchez, October 12th, same firefight, neck. Luis was from Texas. He spoke Spanish when he was scared. He taught Johnny 3 words: hermano, brother; miedo, fear; casa, home. Private First Class Robert Bobby Chen, October 13th, grenade. Bobby was Chinese-American, from San Francisco, the only man in the platoon shorter than Johnny. He'd shared his last cigarette the night before, American Spirit. They'd smoked it down to nothing. Technician 5th grade William Oakes, October 13th, sniper, through the eye. William was the medic, from Ohio. He'd stitched Johnny's hand 2 weeks prior, 14 sutures, steady fingers. He'd hummed while he worked, something jazzy, something soft. Private Donald Kerr, October 14th, 0220 hours, 5 hours ago. Machine gun, 37 rounds. Donald was from Montana. He'd never seen the ocean. He'd asked Johnny what the Pacific looked like. Johnny had tried to describe it, the color, the size, the sound. He couldn't find the words. 6 men, 6 dead. And every time, every single time, the Germans knew exactly where to shoot, because they could hear the platoon moving, hear them talking, hear them breathing. Johnny had grown up in Chinle, Arizona, Canyon de Shale, red rock and silence. His grandfather had taught him something the white officers would never understand. Sound is a weapon, but so is confusion. The Navajo language, Dene Bezad, had no alphabet, no written grammar the Germans could study, no syntax that matched European logic. And Johnny had something else, something he'd learned as a boy. The war cry, the high-pitched, ululating call his ancestors used to scatter enemies, to make one warrior sound like 20. He waited. October 14th, 11:30 hours. Another firefight. The Germans pushed hard, 30, maybe 40 soldiers. They were trying to collapse the American position. Corporal Mitchell took shrapnel in the leg, screaming. Sergeant Kowalski dragged him back behind a blown oak tree. Johnny fired until his barrel glowed red. When it stopped, when the smoke cleared and the ringing in his ears faded, he tried again. "Sarge, let me try." Kowalski looked at him, eyes bloodshot, face caked in dirt and powder residue. "Try what, Rivers?" "Use my voice," said Johnny. "Make them think we got a whole company up here." Kowalski spat tobacco juice into the frozen mud. "Kid, shut up and dig." Lieutenant Brennan didn't even turn around, just waved him off. "We need bullets, Rivers, not circus tricks." But Johnny had been thinking about it for 3 days, since the ambush at Col de la Schlucht, since he'd heard the Germans shouting coordinates to each other in the dark, voices bouncing off rock walls, echoing, multiplying. He waited. October 14th, 22:15 hours. Dark, moonless, the kind of black that presses against your eyes. Johnny sat alone in his foxhole. His left shoulder throbbed, shrapnel wound from the morning. Brennan had told him to get it checked, but the medic was dead, so Johnny stuffed the hole with gauze and tied it down with a bootlace. His rifle lay across his knees, M1 Garand, serial number 34483944. He'd scratched his initials on the stock, JR. Stupid, sentimental, but it felt like the only thing that belonged to him. He thought about Eugene, about James, about Bobby. He thought about the war cry. If he did this, if he tried this without orders, it was insubordination, court-martial, dishonorable discharge, maybe prison. But if he did nothing, more men would die. He made his decision. Johnny Rivers began to practice, quietly, just a whisper, the shapes his mouth needed to make, the Navajo phrases, the pitch shifts, the vibrato, the echo effect his grandfather had taught him. You don't just yell, you layer it, you break it, you make one voice sound like 10. He worked until his throat burned. October 15th, 06:20 hours. First light. Gray. Cold. The smell of pine sap and human waste. The platoon was down to 14 men, ammunition low, water lower, morale crushed. The Germans started early. Mortars, then small arms, then something heavier, a Panzerfaust. The explosion tore through a supply crate, flames, black smoke. Johnny saw his moment. He stood right there in the open, exposed, rifle slung, and screamed. Not in English, not in anything the Germans had ever heard. High-pitched, warbling, a shriek that split the air. Navajo words tumbling over each other, then silence. Then a second, a different pitch, a different rhythm coming from his throat, then a third, then a fourth. He screamed from the left side of his position, then turned and screamed from the right. He made himself sound like a squad, like a platoon, like a wave of soldiers crashing down from the ridge. Kowalski stared at him, mouth open. The German fire stopped. Just stopped. For 11 seconds there was nothing. No shots, no mortars, just wind through the pines. Then chaos. German voices shouting, panicked. Johnny couldn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Confusion, fear. They thought they were surrounded. The Germans began to fall back. Slowly at first, then faster. Johnny kept screaming, kept layering his voice, kept moving, left to right to left. He made it sound like the Americans were everywhere. Lieutenant Brennan was yelling something, but Johnny couldn't stop. He screamed until his throat cracked, until blood vessels burst in his eyes, until his vision blurred. The Germans retreated 100 yards, then 200. When it ended, when Johnny finally collapsed into his foxhole, throat shredded, lungs heaving, Kowalski was standing over him. The sergeant said nothing, just nodded. October 15th, 14:20 hours. The platoon moved forward, carefully, expecting a trap. But the German positions were abandoned, foxholes empty, equipment left behind, ammunition, rations, a map. They counted later. 52 Germans were in those positions. 52. And they'd run. October 16th, 0900 hours. Oberlieutenant Klaus Fischer stood in the command tent, trying to explain what had happened. He was 34, a veteran, Iron Cross second class. He'd fought in Poland, in France, in Russia. But he had no explanation for this. They had reinforcements, he said. I heard them. 50 men, maybe more. The major looked at him. Our reconnaissance saw 14 Americans. No, I heard them. Voices from every direction. A counterattack. We would have been encircled. The major lit a cigarette. You retreated from 14 men. Fischer said nothing. But at night, alone in his tent, he replayed the sounds in his mind. Those voices, inhuman, layered, wrong, like ghosts, like demons. He would hear them for the rest of his life. October 17th through October 29th. Johnny did it again, and again, and again. Each time the Germans fell back, each time Brennan's platoon advanced. They retook the ridgeline, then the supply road, then the village of Latoli. The kill ratio reversed. 6 American dead in 3 days, 41 German casualties in 2 weeks. Brigade headquarters noticed. They wanted to know what had changed. Lieutenant Brennan filed a report. He wrote about improved reconnaissance, better firing discipline, effective use of terrain. He did not mention Johnny Rivers. When Kowalski asked him